So why would you want to walk a VAD? What is a VAD? Well, we already said that malware can unlink from the processor environment block, the LDR data section, which lists all the loaded DLLs. However, within an eProcess block that we've already talked about, there's a pointer to a thing called VADs, virtual address descriptors. VADs, this is a tree, a self-balancing tree, according to Mark Rusanovich and David Solomon in their Windows Internals book, which is very valuable when you're doing this type of analysis. It's a self-balancing binary tree, so we can walk all the leaves and find all the VADs in the system. Now, with a little reverse engineering, the VADs aren't always described what they contain. However, with some reverse engineering, you can figure out that there's the address range, its flags, the parent of the VAD, obviously, to walk up, its left and right child, and a control area. So this VAD contains a control area, and a control area contains a file object. And file objects contain a Unicode string, which is the name of the DLL. So now I have the ability to enumerate all DLLs in the system, unless people's taken the trouble to go playing with my VADs, which I haven't seen any malware yet that does that. It is in papers that will be presented at the Digital Forensic Workshop in 2 weeks that talk about this attack. However, I haven't seen it in practice. So let's demonstrate the tool in working, and we'll also demonstrate the DLL injection from the kernel. So here I have my VMware session, and I have a kernel debugger hooked up just so we can watch some of the messages. So I'm going to inject into Internet Explorer. Sorry about that. I don't have a network connection up and running. So this is the process I'm going to infect. I'm going to do that with the driver that I've created called Sliver. All Sliver is going to do is everything I talked about previously in the slides about injecting from the kernel. It's going to find the target process, which is Internet Explorer. It's going to then allocate memory within that target process, which is going to contain my shellcode. My shellcode is going to call load library, and I'm going to kick it off with an APC or an alertable thread within the process. So if I go down here to the output, this is WinDebug. It found load library, so even if you were using address space randomization and things like that to protect yourself because of the way the code's written, I find your PEB, which can move around. I found that from an eProcess block. I find from the PEB, I then enumerate over the loaded modules to get their address. I then find kernel32.dll. I parse its export address table in order to find load library A, and then I have the grounds for my shellcode. You'll see there output says looking at thread. That's me walking all the threads within the process space, within the eProcess, so that I can determine if it's alertable or not. And then you'll see Simple Network DLL is installed. It's injected now. The APC is fired, evidently, and the DLL is injected. And if this was connected to network, it'd be sitting there waiting on connection. So if I go back to my VM, I see here that Internet Explorer is at 3500 is its PID. The screen right here, this is a job script for my agent code. And I can enumerate over all processes if I so choose. I can do all processes. Every single process is handle tables, DLLs, memory sections, so forth. However, that creates very large files. And Internet Explorer kind of barfs after about 4 megs. So I'm going to just narrow it down to the process in question for this demonstration. And then here is the command line arguments to my agent. So it just spit out a bunch of stuff. This is merely just informative information like, did we find the PS active process head, things like that. Have we been able to derive it? This gives me an indication that things are going along nicely. Okay, now we have a signature of sorts that looks for processes. We're finding all processes within the system. Even if the process has been unhooked using like the FU rootkit or whatever, we can still find it. Every single process we find, we can then analyze its handle tables that we didn't talk about in this presentation. But we can enumerate its handles as well as every single memory section because of the VADs. So I'll show you what the injected DLL looks like here. Here you see that there's injected DLL called covert.dll. This was loaded from C:. It starts at this region of memory, it ends at this region. So if we wanted to do a dump of it, we could dump that memory to a file and reconstitute the DLL in order to throw into something like IDA-Pro. Also, you'll see that its permissions are execute, write, copy. That's how a normal DLL that's loaded with load library shows up. Remember when we allocated the memory in the target process for our shellcode, we also had to mark it execute. So even though there is no file on disk that represents this binary that's in memory, we can determine, just like in the interpreter example, that its permissions are execute, read, write, which is an anomaly. This doesn't normally exist, especially when it's not mapped as a file. So not only can we detect the injected DLL, we can detect how it was injected. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm working to get my company to let me release this code into a standalone version that you'll run from the command line and so forth. There won't be source code available. Most likely, they won't go that far. But I will take questions now, Aaron. Okay, so the question is, there's also already a lot of research in open source and commercial tools that already have similar things. Well, this is only a subset of what we can do.
Would you be willing to have like a challenge, like other people's tools versus yours by like sometime this week?
Not by sometime this week.
But you said it's already done, right? Why not prove it that you've already done it? I mean, when I spoke with you recently, you said you didn't have the majority of it done. And I'm just wondering how you would now claim that it is.
Well, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to do port enumeration, things like that, yeah, that's done. If you want to do process reconstitution from the paging file, no, that's not done. So I think...
And then why, if there are other people that have it, why do you have patent pending on the slides that's just there? I mean,
it's the way we're doing it, perhaps different. Walking VADs, there is no way the patent would hold up against that, right?
To me, none of this stuff is patentable because it's like this is the way the operating systems work. So Microsoft knows how it works, right? Like Microsoft has the data structure. Microsoft can actually do it. They don't. It's not IP. It's no new technology. You know what I mean?
That's something you can take up with my boss and our lawyer. And what makes us different than others is I think our tool set is more complete. We don't rely upon symbols. We support PAE, non-PAE. We support a range of operating systems that other tools don't. And we can also do it faster, usually, than most tools. I've analyzed a commercial tool that does this. It took it 20 minutes to dump out roughly the same output that it took me 2 minutes to do. So
I think you're involved in a commercial product that already has that capability, has had that capability for a while, which does it, right?
it did not have the capability when I was there. Any other questions or pissed off customers?
What's the extent of information you can Can you get rootkits this way?
Okay, so the question was, what's the extent of information that you can get using these techniques? And can you get rootkits? Yeah, you can do rootkit detection using methodologies like this. In our tool, we also do very high-level API calls to get the same sources of data. So give me all the processes, give me all the DLLs within that process, things like that. So you can do a cross-view analysis between the low-level memory searching versus the API level.
All right. How about if the rootkit is, I don't know, hooked in the MDIS function pointers?
Okay, if the rootkit's hooked in indis function pointers, it gets a lot more tricky. And at that point, you may or may not detect them. However, the level of, you could perhaps still detect the hooks. So although you couldn't detect them on disk, you could detect them in memory.